The first light of dawn broke in muted streaks across the barnyard, scattering long shadows that clung to the wet earth like ghosts. The air smelled of frost and damp hay, sharp enough to sting the lungs, yet soft enough to carry a distant, desperate whine. I was leaning against the rough wood of the old barn, shivering, clutching a coffee cup that had long gone cold, when I saw it, a German shepherd, silhouetted against the pale orange sky. Its coat glimmered wet and dark, and its movements were cautious, deliberate, as if each step carried the weight of a secret. The dog paused at the edge of the corral, ears perked, eyes scanning me with a strange intelligence, almost human. There was something in its gaze that made my chest tighten, an unspoken plea, a warning, a story I didn't yet understand. In its mouth, it carried something small and trembling. My heart lurched, a mix of fear and instinctual compassion, and before I could even move, the dog dropped the bundle at my feet and retreated a few steps, waiting. Waiting for what? Or for whom? The wind shifted, and the secret it carried seemed to hum in the chill morning air, whispering that this dawn would change everything. The first light of dawn seeped slowly into the barnyard, soft and trembling like it wasn't sure it belonged there. Mist clung to the earth, curling over the frost-hardened ground in pale, ghostly coils brushing against my boots as I leaned against the splintered wood of the old barn. The smell of damp hay and cold soil filled the air, pungent and familiar, yet somehow sharper this morning, as if the world itself was holding its breath. My fingers tightened around a cup of coffee that had long lost its warmth, the liquid now bitter and cold, a poor consolation for the tension tightening in my chest. I hadn't expected anyone, or anything, to arrive here not so early, not like this. And yet there it was. A German shepherd emerged from the haze, its silhouette fluid and precise, moving with cautious determination. Each paw step left a dark imprint on the frost, each breath fogging in the chill air like a whisper of life. My heart seized, a sudden, unbidden shock of awareness, because in that dog's gaze was something I couldn't immediately name. Intelligence, wariness, and something else, something heavier, something urgent that made me swallow hard and step back instinctively. The shepherd paused at the edge of the corral, ears pricked, eyes scanning the barn with a careful calculation. Its fur was slick from dew or perhaps rain, dark against the muted light, glinting faintly in the first hints of sunrise. It didn't approach, it didn't retreat. It simply watched, and in that watching, the world shifted. I could hear the distant crow of a rooster, sharp and bright against the stillness, the rustle of straw in the barn, the faint creak of the old wooden roof settling in the cool morning. The dog's eyes were fixed on me, unblinking, unnervingly still, and I felt an almost physical pull, like gravity had shifted toward this living, breathing creature. I didn't know if it was fear or awe, but my chest tightened, my pulse quickened, and my mind raced with possibilities I wasn't ready to face. The stillness stretched, taut and fragile, until the dog moved again, just a step, then another, and then it stopped. In its mouth, I finally saw it, a small bundle, trembling, barely moving, but undeniably alive. My breath caught in my throat. It was covered in something soft, fur, I realized only after the first stunned moment, and a faint whimper escaped it as the dog carefully lowered it to the frost-laden ground. My knees buckled slightly. I crouched instinctively, reaching out with trembling hands. The shepherd didn't approach any closer. It dropped the bundle a few feet away and retreated, sitting just beyond the edge of the corral, tail wrapped around its paws, eyes never leaving me. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to pick up the fragile life before me, but something in the dog's stance, the measured distance, the quiet insistence, told me that trust had to be earned, that this was not just a gift, but a challenge. My hands hovered over the bundle, feeling its shallow, uneven breaths through the rough fabric or fur, and I felt a sudden, profound responsibility press down on me, heavier than any burden I had carried before. The morning air was sharp, biting into my exposed skin, and the sun's first rays were barely enough to illuminate the frost and straw, but they caught on the shepherd's coat, highlighting the curves of its muscular frame, the alert tilt of its ears, the quiet power in its presence. There was a rhythm here, in the dog, in the trembling life it carried, in the way the wind whispered through the rafters and across the yard. It was a rhythm of survival, of vigilance, of something sacred I had stumbled into without knowing. I could hear the soft whine again, low and persistent, and it echoed in the barnyard as if it were speaking directly to me, carrying a question I couldn't yet answer. And yet, I wanted to answer it. I wanted to rise to meet whatever challenge this small creature and its guardian had brought to my doorstep. My mind raced through questions. Whose was this life? Where had it come from? What danger had it endured to arrive here at my feet? But the questions themselves felt secondary to the weight of the moment, to the undeniable reality of life pressed into my hands before I had a chance to think. The dog shifted slightly, muscles coiled, eyes flicking toward the horizon, then back at me. It was aware of everything, every distant sound, every rustle in the straw, every scent carried on the wind. And in that awareness I felt the magnitude of what it had done. It had chosen me. In a world where indifference was easier, where passing by would have sufficed, it had walked across the damp earth, through the uncertainty of dawn, to deposit something vital, fragile, and precious in my care. My chest ached with the weight of unders, 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 with the weight of understand, 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 with the weight of understanding, 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 with the weight of understanding. The frost on the ground seemed sharper, the light colder, the air thicker. Every sense I had was alive to the moment. The taste of fear, the scent of damp earth, the visual clarity of the dog's alert stance, the feel of life trembling beneath my hands. Time itself seemed suspended, waiting for the next move, waiting for the next decision. I finally bent, careful not to startle either of them, and lifted the small bundle. It was lighter than I expected, yet every ounce carried an unmistakable weight. The weight of fragility, of survival, of the unspoken story that had led it here. The German shepherd's eyes followed me, unwavering, patient, as if saying, "Do not fail." Do not betray the trust I have placed in you. And in that look, in the silent intensity of that gaze, I felt something break open inside me. A door I hadn't realized was locked, a surge of empathy and resolve that rooted me to the spot. I could feel the faint heartbeat against my palm, irregular but steady, and it anchored me to this reality. A secret had been delivered at dawn, and it was mine to honor. The wind shifted, cold and insistent, scattering loose straw across the barnyard and carrying with it the scent of damp wood, hay, and something unnameable, the scent of change, of life altered irrevocably. The dog rose slowly, stretching with elegant precision, muscles rippling beneath wet fur, then sat again, just beyond the bundle, eyes trained on me. It wasn't leaving, but it wasn't approaching either. It was waiting, holding, ensuring, teaching. And in that waiting, in the fragile light of the rising sun, I realized the day had already begun, but life itself, real, raw, unfiltered life, was only just arriving. The dawn was no longer just a passage of light. It was a threshold. It was a summons. And as I cradled the trembling bundle, feeling the warmth of life against my chest, I understood with a sudden, almost terrifying clarity that nothing would ever be the same again. The shepherd's gaze softened just slightly, a subtle shift that carried centuries of instinct, a promise of loyalty and quiet guidance. I met it halfway, acknowledging the unspoken pact. In that moment, in the muted gold of dawn, in the chill that seeped into my bones, in the trembling heartbeat of the life I held, I knew that this was the beginning of a story neither of us could have anticipated. A story of survival, trust, and the unbreakable bond that forms when the world seems at its coldest, its harshest, and yet, just beyond the frost, life insists on being tender, urgent, and miraculous. The shepherd didn't move closer, nor did it retreat. It simply observed, each motion deliberate, a quiet rhythm of patience that seemed almost human in its intelligence. I knelt beside the small bundle it had brought, my hands trembling as they hovered above the fragile form. Its tiny chest rose and fell with shallow, uneven breaths, and a soft whimper escaped its lips, barely audible over the creak of the barn and the whispering wind through the rafters. My chest ached in a way I hadn't expected, as if the very act of watching life cling to life was a personal responsibility pressed upon me in that moment. I reached out, finally daring to touch the soft, damp fur, and the small creature shivered under my fingertips, tiny muscles coiling instinctively. It was a fragile promise of survival, an echo of battles fought in silence, and my heart twisted with both tenderness and dread. The shepherd shifted, muscles taut, tail flicking just slightly, a signal that every motion, every breath mattered. Its eyes never left me, a steady, unyielding reminder that this wasn't simply about rescue. It was about trust, the slow, painstaking building of a bond that could not be rushed. Outside, the sun rose higher, spilling light into the barnyard in thin golden lines, catching on the frost and illuminating every mote of dust that hung in the air. The warmth was deceptive. It did not chase away the tension that had settled over the space like a second layer of skin. Each sound, the faint rustle of straw, the distant crow of a rooster, the occasional clatter of loose metal from the barn, seemed amplified, part of a symphony of alertness shared by both of us. And I realized with a shiver that ran down my spine that the dog and I were listening to the same rhythms, reading the same subtle cues, understanding in ways that went beyond words. I lowered myself fully onto the cold floor, feeling the rough wood beneath me, the sharp scent of straw and earth filling my nostrils. The bundle trembled in my hands, its small body warm and wet, a fragile heartbeat against my palm. The shepherd tilted its head slightly, nostrils flaring, ears twitching at a sound too faint for me to hear. In that tilt, there was a question, a silent communication. Will you protect this life? Can it survive under your care? I didn't answer aloud, but my fingers tightened around the trembling form, a promise that the world had shifted irrevocably. The barn, once a place of routine and isolation, had become a crucible of vulnerability, a space where survival and trust intertwined with raw, almost unbearable intimacy. The morning stretched onward, slow and deliberate, and in the muted light, the shepherd's presence was both grounding and haunting. Its coat gleamed faintly, wet and dark, muscles shifting under taut skin with each cautious step it took around the edges of the corral. I watched the careful movements, noticing the subtle shifts in posture, the way its tail flicked only when it deemed safe, the minute flare of the nostrils as it tracked invisible scents in the air. The shepherd shifted one last time, circling the edge of the barn, tail low but steady, ears flicking at sounds I couldn't hear. Its presence was no longer just vigilance. It was guidance, a subtle communication of patience and loyalty, a quiet insistence that we were in this together. I met its gaze, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of the responsibility it had entrusted to me, and the fragile, shimmering hope that we might navigate this dawn together. The tiny life in my hands, a living testament to trust, courage, and the beginnings of a bond that would shape every moment to come. The morning sun had climbed higher now, spilling a warmer, amber light across the barn, yet it did little to soften the chill that lingered in the corners of the old building. Dust motes floated in the air, caught in the beams of light that slipped through cracks in the wooden walls, moving like tiny spirits stirred by unseen hands. The shepherd lay a few feet away from me, still vigilant but less rigid, its body relaxed in short bursts, every so often flicking its tail or raising a cautious ear. Its eyes, dark pools of memory and instinct, seemed to reflect not just the present moment but something older, deeper. A history written in scars, in subtle shifts of posture, in the faint tremor of muscles conditioned by struggle. I couldn't stop staring, trying to read the story etched into the lines of its frame, the rhythm of its breathing, the way it shifted weight from paw to paw, each subtle movement a language of survival I had only begun to understand. The small bundle in my arms, still trembling faintly, seemed to echo that history, carrying within its tiny form the fragility of life yet to be hardened by the world. I traced the curves of its damp fur, noticing the slight calluses on its tiny paws, the way its nose twitched with each inhalation, every detail a reminder that life persisted even through fear, even through hardship. I could almost hear the echoes of the past, the silent nights the shepherd had endured alone, the hunger, the cold, the whispered fears that had accompanied it through each step, and yet there was also resilience. A fierce, unspoken will that refused surrender, a pulse of determination that kept it moving forward, even when the world had seemed too heavy, too cruel. My own heart ached as I recognized the mirrored echo of pain and hope, the quiet acknowledgement that survival often leaves invisible marks, and that love and loyalty can emerge from the most unexpected places. I rose slowly, holding the fragile life close, and felt the soft brush of the shepherd's fur as it shifted position, moving closer yet maintaining a careful distance. There was a dialogue here without words, a subtle negotiation of trust that neither time nor explanation could accelerate. The barn seemed alive with the weight of these silent exchanges. The scrape of my boots on the rough wood, the faint rustle of straw, the whisper of wind against the tin roof, the distant crow of a rooster now softened by distance, all of it forming a tapestry of presence that made the past and present collide. I realized then that the shepherd had not simply delivered a life into my hands. It had brought a story, a lineage of struggle and survival, and it was asking me to bear witness, to honor what had come before while protecting what could still flourish. I settled against the wall, leaning into the rough grain of the wood as the tiny life in my arms pressed against my chest. The shepherd's gaze remained locked on me, unwavering, and I felt a quiet pressure building in my chest, a mixture of awe, fear, and deep, almost unbearable empathy. Every scar on its frame, every twitch of its ears, every subtle tension in its muscles, spoke of experiences I could never fully know but could deeply feel. I imagined the cold nights it had endured, the hunger gnawing at its belly, the loneliness that had been its constant companion, and I realized the sheer courage it must have taken to carry this fragile life to my doorstep. I whispered softly, almost instinctively, promises I could not fully articulate, words carried more in breath than in meaning, that it would be safe now, that its burdens could be shared, that this new dawn would not be endured alone. The day deepened, stretching into hours where the light grew warmer, but the tension of past and present clung stubbornly to the space. I noticed every detail of the shepherd's form, the way its ears flicked at faint noises, the subtle quiver along its flank when the wind shifted, the occasional tilt of its head as it assessed me, weighing my intentions, gauging the depth of my commitment. And in observing these tiny signals, I felt the immense gravity of trust, the kind that cannot be demanded but must be earned slowly, carefully, through action, patience, and empathy. I could feel the heartbeat of the small life in my hands, irregular but insistent, a reminder that hope persisted even amidst trauma, that resilience could bloom in the shadow of suffering, that courage often arrived in the quietest forms. I walked slowly to the barn door, cradling the fragile bundle, and paused to look out at the surrounding fields bathed in amber light. Frost still clung to the edges of the grass, shimmering like crystals in the morning sun. The wind carried the scent of damp earth, of distant trees, of life continuing beyond the walls of the barn. I realized then that the shepherd had not merely chosen to survive. It had chosen to connect, to trust, to bridge the gap between solitude and companionship, between fear and hope. And in that choice, it had created a silent bond not just with me, but with the future of the life it had delivered. A thread that wove past and present together in a fragile tapestry of care. The small creature in my arms stirred again, pressing its tiny body closer, and I felt a flicker of warmth ripple through me. A subtle reassurance that life, however fragile, could persist, could thrive, could respond to gentle, consistent care. The shepherd rose then, stretching with precise elegance, muscles rippling under its wet coat, and moved a few careful steps closer. It didn't intervene, didn't demand. It simply observed, a sentinel of patience and quiet expectation. I could feel its confidence in me, a fragile acknowledgement that perhaps I could meet the demands of this delicate responsibility. And in that silent exchange, I understood something I hadn't realized before. The past was not simply a memory. It was an active force shaping the present, guiding choices, informing trust, and teaching resilience in ways that could not be articulated in words. Hours passed in this quiet rhythm, the barn now a sanctuary of observation, empathy, and tentative connection. I traced the faint scars along the shepherd's legs and shoulders, noting the subtle stiffness that hinted at battles fought long before I had ever arrived. The small life in my arms pressed against my chest, warmth spreading slowly, a fragile ember of trust that mirrored the quiet fire in the dog's attentive eyes. I whispered again, soft murmurs that carried my intention, my promise, my growing understanding that survival was never solitary, that love and loyalty could be forged in silence, and that bonds formed under the weight of fear and hope were some of the strongest of all. As the sun began to dip, spilling elongated shadows across the frost-kissed barn floor, I felt the first true connection between us. A silent recognition of shared responsibility, of vulnerability met with courage, of past struggles acknowledged and future possibilities embraced. The shepherd lay down again, ears flicking but eyes never leaving me, its form a quiet monument to resilience and loyalty. And in that moment, surrounded by the muted amber glow, the scent of hay and damp earth, and the subtle tremble of life pressing against my chest, I realized that I was no longer merely a bystander. I had become a participant in a story that stretched back into the shadows of the past and forward into a future I could not yet see. And somehow, miraculously, I knew that this chapter, these echoes of struggle, of survival, of silent devotion, would shape everything that followed. By late afternoon, the sun had begun its slow descent, turning the sky above the barn into a wash of bruised purples and muted golds, as if the world itself were holding its breath before some inevitable reckoning. The wind picked up, curling around the edges of the barn, rattling loose boards, and scattering straw across the frost-slick floor. The faint whistle of air through the gaps in the roof sounded like distant voices, reminders of a world outside these walls, a world still waiting, still dangerous. The shepherd stood near the barn's center, body taut and alert, ears swiveling toward the slightest sound, tail flicking in measured bursts. Its eyes, dark and intelligent, followed my every movement, assessing, calculating, warning me that while the morning had brought hope, the afternoon demanded vigilance. I could feel tension coil around my own chest in response, a deep physical echo of the dog's anxious energy, as if the barn itself were an organism that sensed peril and braced against it. The small bundle in my arms shivered faintly, the trembling now amplified by the rising wind, and I pressed it closer, feeling its fragile warmth against my chest. The reality of responsibility hit me like a sudden gust, sharp and unrelenting. This life, delicate and uncertain, was entirely dependent on my choices, my awareness, my ability to act without hesitation. I felt a deep, almost primal surge of fear. What if I failed? What if the shepherd had judged me incorrectly? Every instinct I had screamed at me to protect, to shelter, to act, yet the enormity of the task made my limbs heavy, my movements hesitant. And yet, hesitation was a luxury I could not afford. Every moment mattered. I could hear the faint heartbeat of the small life in my hands, irregular but insistent, and it anchored me even as anxiety coiled tighter around my ribs. The wind rose further, whistling and rattling the barn doors, carrying with it the sense of distant fields, damp soil, and something else, something intangible, the faint, sharp edge of danger lingering in the air. The shepherd shifted, stepping a few cautious paces closer, tail low but steady, muscles coiled like springs ready to release. Its gaze never left me, never left the bundle, a silent assertion of trust but also a stark reminder. The responsibility was mine to bear. the danger mine to acknowledge. I met its eyes, and in that gaze was both an expectation and a question, an unspoken understanding that inaction could not be tolerated, that every decision now carried weight beyond imagination. The air seemed thicker, denser, laden with tension and urgency, pressing against the barn walls and my chest alike. And I realized the quiet resilience I had felt in the morning was only the beginning. The storm, both literal and metaphorical, was approaching. I shifted the bundle slightly, adjusting it against my chest to guard against the chill, noticing the faint tremors that ran through its body. The shepherd watched with acute focus, ears twitching, tail flicking, every sense alive, alert to the smallest vibration in the barn, the tiniest change in light or shadow. Outside, clouds had begun to gather in rolling layers, deep gray and bruised, blotting out the golden glow of late afternoon and muting the barn in a somber, diffused light. Each shadow seemed longer, more deliberate, echoing the weight of uncertainty pressing against the walls. My own heartbeat thudded, irregular, but resolute, a rhythm anchored by necessity and the fragile trust I had been granted. I whispered softly, words that felt inadequate yet necessary, promises of protection, reassurance, and care. The shepherd's ears flicked in response, a subtle acknowledgement that my intentions had been noted, that trust could grow even amidst the uncertainty of impending storm. Rain began as a whisper first, tapping gently against the tin roof and stirring the straw at our feet. Then it became insistent, a drumming that echoed through the barn, vibrating against the walls and mingling with the wind in a chaotic symphony. The small life in my arms pressed closer, shivering against me, and I felt a wave of responsibility like a tide pulling at my very bones. I could not fail. I could not falter. The shepherd paced a narrow path along the edges of the barn, muscles flexing beneath slick fur, nostrils flaring as it assessed the storm and any potential threat it might bring. There was a raw beauty in its vigilance, a lesson in courage and steadfastness that I could feel in every nerve ending. And in watching it, I felt my own anxiety transform into focused determination, a quiet, stubborn flame that refused to be extinguished. The storm outside intensified, wind tearing at loose boards, rain hammering the roof in relentless rhythm. Yet inside, a fragile sanctuary existed, defined by the boundaries of care and trust we had established. I shifted my weight, adjusting the bundle, noticing the warmth of life against my chest, the faint heartbeat that pulsed like a secret drum. I could feel the shepherd's gaze following every movement, a constant, steady presence reminding me that the world beyond these walls was fraught with uncertainty, but that here, in this moment, we were united in purpose. Every sense was heightened. The scent of wet fur and hay, the cool dampness of the floor, the erratic flicker of light through gaps in the barn, the distant roll of thunder over the fields. All of it sharpened perception, intensified awareness, and underscored the delicate balance between fear and courage. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time had lost its usual shape in the intensity of focus and care. The storm raged, yet in its midst, a quiet intimacy formed between the shepherd, the small life in my hands, and me. Each subtle movement, each cautious breath, each gentle reassurance became a dialogue of survival and trust. I could feel the tension in my muscles mirroring the tension in the dog's stance, the shared alertness binding us together in a silent pact. And yet, within that tension, there was a flicker of something else, hope, a tiny ember that refused to be snuffed out, glimmering through the roar of the storm, anchored by our presence, our care, our willingness to endure. As dusk approached, the storm began to ebb slightly, leaving the barn damp and darkened, but alive with the echoes of what had transpired. The shepherd settled close to the edge of the straw, tail curled around its paws, eyes softening just enough to reveal exhaustion and relief, but still alert, still present. I adjusted the small life in my arms, feeling its subtle warmth, the rhythm of its heartbeat, the trust it had begun to place in me. And in that still, rain-scented air, I realized the storm had not merely been a test of weather or endurance. It had been a mirror of inner conflict, a crucible for courage, patience, and the unspoken bond that forms when responsibility becomes urgent and unavoidable. The wind faded to a whisper, the rain softened to a gentle drizzle, and for the first time in hours, I exhaled fully, feeling the weight of tension begin to lift just slightly. The shepherd remained near, silent sentinel, a reminder that vigilance did not cease, but that trust once earned could endure. I whispered again, words carried softly through the damp air promising protection, safety, and unwavering care. The small creature in my arms stirred, nuzzling against me instinctively, and in that motion I sensed the first true acknowledgement of hope, of survival, of life persisting against adversity. The barn, once a place of quiet routine, now resonated with the complex rhythms of fear, trust, and resilience, a sanctuary forged in the crucible of storm and uncertainty. As darkness settled beyond the barn doors, a fragile peace descended inside. The shepherd's eyes met mine one last time, lingering, steady, and full of silent understanding. I felt the weight of responsibility, the burden of trust, and the fragile brilliance of hope intertwine in a moment that seemed suspended between night and dawn. I understood then that storms, both outside and within, could shape us, test us, and ultimately teach us the depth of courage, loyalty, and compassion that lay dormant until pressed into action. And as I held the trembling life close, feeling its warmth, I knew that this night, and the trials it had brought, would mark the point from which nothing would ever feel ordinary again. The first light of dawn returned to the barn, gentle and tentative, brushing the wet wood with soft streaks of gold and pale rose. The storm of the previous evening had left its mark. Straw clung to damp walls, puddles glimmered where the rain had pooled, and the air smelled of wet earth, hay, and something indefinably alive. Outside, the fields were slick and muted under the early light, shadows lingering where the trees had absorbed the night. Inside, the barn felt transformed. No longer merely a shelter, it was a sanctuary carved from patience, struggle, and trust. The shepherd lay close to the corner, sleek fur damp from the storm, eyes softening as they watched the tiny life that had been delivered into my care. There was no tension now, only vigilance tempered by understanding, a quiet acknowledgement that the past hours had cemented bonds deeper than words could describe. The small bundle in my arms stirred, pressing its tiny body closer against me, and I felt a rush of relief that nearly brought tears to my eyes. Its warmth was fragile but insistent, a heartbeat echoing the resilience that had carried it through fear and cold, through storm and uncertainty. I traced the curve of its tiny back, listening to the faint, rhythmic sighs of comfort it made, and realized that survival had not only arrived at dawn, it had arrived into our hands, carried across peril by a guardian who understood the cost of life in ways I was only beginning to grasp. The shepherd shifted closer, tail brushing softly against the straw-strewn floor, ears flicking at the smallest sound, eyes never leaving us. In that careful watchfulness, I recognized a devotion that had been tempered in loneliness, forged in hardship, and now offered freely to a new chapter of connection. The morning air carried the faint rustle of leaves from beyond the barn, soft and steady, mingling with the distant call of birds welcoming the day. I held the fragile life closer, feeling the gentle tremors subside as warmth and calm seeped into its small body. The shepherd rose slowly, stretching with elegant precision, muscles rippling under its damp coat. It circled us once, then settled back, tail curling around its paws, eyes softened in a way that suggested both relief and pride. The scene was almost poetic in its quietness. The interplay of three lives bound together by circumstance, trust, and the sheer, uncompromising insistence of survival. I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with the mingling sense of wet straw, fur, and the cool morning air, and felt a profound sense of ripeness, as though this moment had always been meant to arrive. As the day brightened, I began to notice details I had overlooked before. The subtle rise and fall of the shepherd's chest, the soft coo of the bundle's breathing, the way light filtered through cracks in the barn, casting moving patterns across the floor. Every detail seemed alive with meaning, every motion imbued with history and promise. I could almost sense the memory in the dog's gaze, past hardships, battles endured, nights spent alone, and how those echoes had shaped the loyalty and wisdom it now offered freely. I understood with a sharp, almost overwhelming clarity that the shepherd had not simply delivered life into my hands. It had delivered a lesson. It had shown me the depth of responsibility, the quiet power of patience, the fragile beauty of trust earned through action rather than demand. The small life in my arms stirred again, eyes flickering open just enough to glimpse the world, and I felt my heart swell with a mixture of relief, love, and awe. The shepherd leaned forward slightly, nose twitching, as if checking on our shared ward, and I felt a silent communion pass between us. A pact forged in the darkest hours, reinforced by the storm, and now celebrated in the gentle light of dawn. It was a bond that required nothing but presence, attentiveness, and care, yet carried the weight of entire world. I whispered softly, murmuring words that seemed inadequate but necessary, promises to protect, to nurture, to honor the life that had been entrusted to me. The shepherd's eyes softened further, a subtle acknowledgement that my words were heard, that our shared vigilance had borne fruit. That hope could exist even after fear and chaos. Outside, the wind had calmed, carrying only faint whispers of movement across the fields. The distant hills glowed in soft pastel hues, and the barn, with its damp floors and straw-strewn corners, felt like the center of the world, a place where survival, courage, and love intersected in quiet, deliberate harmony. I held the bundle tighter, feeling its small heartbeat against my chest, and realized that this fragile creature, once unknown and alone, had become the axis upon which my own understanding of life, trust, and responsibility now turned. The shepherd lay nearby, head resting on its paws, breathing deep and steady, an ever-present reminder of loyalty that transcends circumstance, that waits for the moment it is needed most, that carries the burdens of others without complaint or hesitation. Time seemed suspended, measured not by minutes or hours, but by the rhythm of life, by the quiet pulses of heartbeats and the soft sighs of breath. I felt the weight of every decision, every movement, every choice that had brought us to this point, and yet there was no fear, only a quiet, luminous hope that had taken root in the storm of the previous night. I sensed that this morning was not an ending, but a continuation, the first note in a melody that would unfold across days and months, perhaps years, with moments of struggle, triumph, tenderness, and heartbreak interwoven like threads in a living tapestry. The shepherd lifted its head, ears twitching at a distant sound, eyes briefly scanning the barnyard, and then returned its gaze to us. In that glance, I felt a silent acknowledgement of all that had passed and all that was yet to come. It was a recognition of life's fragility, yes, but also of its indomitable resilience, of the quiet bravery that emerges when responsibility is accepted and nurtured rather than ignored. I understood then that the dog had chosen not only to protect the bundle, but to entrust me with a fragment of its own life, its own story, and its own courage. The realization pressed against my chest with a weight both heavy and exquisite, filling me with a profound gratitude and humility. I shifted slightly, settling onto the damp floor, the tiny life warm against my chest, the shepherd lying beside me like a shadow made flesh, alert yet calm, steadfast in its silent duty. The barn, with its scattered straw and lingering sense of rain, of earth, and of life, had become more than a shelter. It had become a witness to transformation, to connection, to the forging of bonds that cannot be severed by circumstance or time. The wind whispered faintly through the rafters, a gentle murmur that seemed to echo my thoughts. This was the morning after midnight, the dawn after darkness, the first light of a story that would endure, not because it was easy, but because life, in all its fragile persistence, had chosen to survive. I felt the shepherd's presence shift, a subtle nudge against my side, a reminder that loyalty and love are not always loud, that courage does not demand recognition, that survival often arrives on quiet paws and in soft, watchful eyes. The bundle stirred again, small and warm, and I pressed a kiss to its damp fur, feeling the pulse of life against my palm, the continuity of existence echoing in its fragile heartbeat. The barn seemed to exhale, the tension of the storm fading, leaving only the luminous quiet of resilience and hope. And in that moment, I understood fully that the dawn had not merely revealed a secret, it had transformed everything. We were no longer separate lives intersecting by chance. We were a small, fragile unit forged in adversity, bound by trust, loyalty, and the shared miracle of life preserved against odds. As the light deepened, spilling golden clarity across the barn floor, I rose slowly, carrying the bundle with reverence, feeling the weight of its tiny life, and the presence of the shepherd beside me. Outside, the field stretched into the morning haze, untouched yet alive with possibility. I understood then that each day would be a choice, to protect, to nurture, to honor what had been entrusted to us. And as the shepherd glanced at me one last time, eyes glinting with a mixture of pride and quiet acknowledgement, I knew that whatever lay ahead this morning, this fragile, luminous morning after midnight, had rewritten the definition of hope, of courage, and of love. The barn was still, save for the soft breathing of three lives intertwined by circumstance, trust, and survival. And in that quiet, I felt the profound truth of everything that had come before and all that was yet to unfold. Sometimes, the most extraordinary bonds are formed in the smallest gestures, the quietest moments, and the simplest acts of trust. The shepherd rested, the tiny life nestled against me, and I closed my eyes, letting the weight of dawn and the promise of life wash over me. The morning after midnight had arrived, and with it a story of resilience, connection, and love that would endure long after the storm had passed.